There are books you want to read slowly and books you want to devour. And Rural Hours is absolutely the former. With Rural Hours, you find yourself utterly engrossed in the lives of three female authors, Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Townsend Warner, and Rosamond Lehmann. It's not difficult to picture yourself walking the rolling English fields, or picking out home decorations, or making jam in preparations for winter. Baker presents before us a biography that is both vivid and imaginative, and truly, if ever there was a book much more suitable for the readers of fiction than for the readers of nonfiction, I would say it would be this one. I have never before seen someone quote so much from their subjects, quote so much from the authors that Harriet Baker writes about. And I think the result of this is that we have before us a tale that almost feels like it's the three women who wrote it. It reads much like the style of the three authors in question, because Baker quotes from interviews, diaries, letters, and where there are gaps, she supplements them with her own reflection. The style is never boring. Instead, it feels like you're a silent observer, living your life amongst these three literary stars. It's engaging, and the best part of it is that it isn't rushed. Baker takes us by the hands and allows us to, just for a moment, to exist alongside these characters without pulling us in one direction or another. She allows us to just stay there and be with them. And truly, I think the result of this is that it's raw and personal and intimate. I'm getting a bit tired from holding the book, but I'll just continue talking without it. What I want to say is that the pacing gets it exactly right, which I think is another great merit of the book, because it seems to perfectly aptly suit its tone, suit its structure, suit its pace to the voice of the protagonist. For example, let's take Virginia Woolf and her nervous, anxious energy, the type of energy that I personally feel resonates heavily throughout her novels. That kind of energy where you feel restless with the life that you have, where you're overly observant, where you exist in this, well, which she herself termed stream of consciousness, when you're constantly observing what's going on around you and being fully aware, when you're attuned with your very being to the fine ups and downs and lows of life. And that exact structure, that exact pacing, is very much mirrored in this biography here, which only makes us feel like Virginia Woolf wrote it herself even more. Moreover, in the novel, the most precious thing that I gained from this experience was the insight that I felt it gave us into the three authors. Again, in the case of Virginia Woolf, the insight I felt it gave me into her work, it really allowed me to see her work from a different perspective, to see the way that it was shaped by its consequences. It's always hard to write about an author without writing about their work. Of course, they're a writer. It consumes their very being. They devote themselves utterly, completely to it. It's their life's work. It's their craft. How can you write about an author without writing about their work? How can you write about the work without writing about the author? And I think that Baker manages to strike that balance perfectly, where we have all the necessary clues presented to us in this carefully, neatly presented package with, by the way, this absolutely beautiful cover design. And I also got a bookmark, look, it matches the book. But yeah, we have this absolutely neatly, perfectly presented parcel of information and of clues, and we really see how Virginia Woolf's life events unfolded in a linear way. It's not just information like on a screen from a Wikipedia article from Google. It's information that we almost live through because we feel so intimately and closely and completely within this novel. And so we live through this, and we really can imagine her sitting there and writing all of these novels. Or we can imagine how one experience of the mundane utterly transformed her experience for writing, how it contributed to her writing, how it influenced her. We can see that, but yet at the same time we're offered these clues but never led to a certain conclusion. Baker can point us to the right direction, but she never outwardly says, this this is the moment which we see in the novel, and I know for sure that this is this because she can't know for sure. And I like that she chose that fine line between the certainty and uncertainty. It makes us feel like we're a part of the game, a part of the chase. It's, of course, impossible because that game is a very difficult one. Before us, you have a work that is meticulously well researched. It would be impossible for us to be in the archives along with Barker because there's inhuman effort in this book. Like, there are pages upon pages of references that are strewn throughout this book, and this is alongside with the quotes that were included. Select bibliography for those who are interested in further reading, which I have to say I'm very interested, but I do not have the time to read pages and pages upon this, but nor do I need to because Barker summarized it within this. For me, it means a big deal. Not just because I'm very impressed by the work that the author has done, but because I think that it really is meriting of these authors. You guys know Virginia Woolf is a personal favorite of mine, which is why so far the review has been, well, centered on her. But really, all of these three women deserve a work worthy of the impact that they had on the legacy of not just women writers but writers in general. And so I really like the way that Rural Hours explores this transformation, because really it is an utter transformation. Over the course of 300 pages, we see moments that biographers have often overlooked, those tiny moments of the mundane, and the way that it impacts them, the way that it helps invigorate them, helps Virginia Woolf gain back her strengths after a recovery, or helps Sylvia Townsend Warner find peace in telling herself, no, I can escape to the countryside. I'm not like the rest of my class background. I can make my life worth living. I can find a worthy cause. Or the way that it tells Rosamond Lehmann, hey, you can make a life for yourself. You can make a life that you truly like with the man that you love, even if it's an imperfect affair with a married man. I cannot think of a book more perfect for lovers of the countryside, for lovers of nature, and honestly for those seeking an escape, because the countryside serves as an escape for these women. It is at once a refuge and a place for their social gatherings, and a place where they can be at once reclusive and alienated from the politics of their time and the difficult war, because many of them lived through the war, and of course at the same time thrust into the spotlight when they can really choose their own opinions and choose their own standing. But to go back to some of the other characters, I say characters, but it honestly feels like they're our acquaintances after reading 300 pages about them. Back to, for example, Sylvia Townsend Warner. I have read Sylvia Townsend Warner before in reading Lolly Willows, which is one of my new all-time favorite books. I read it during October, perfect for spooky season. It's about a spinster, as she's termed by society, a woman who has grown up in the care of her family, who doesn't have children, who doesn't have a husband. And then when her immediate father dies, she's sent off to live with her brother who can look after her, and she starts partaking in domestic life of her brother's family. She's just known as Aunt Lolly to all the kids, and she really loses her identity, and eventually she decides, I don't want this life. I don't want to just constantly be Aunt Lolly to some kids and to just live with my brother for the rest of his life. I want independence. So she escapes into the countryside as a spinster, may I remind you. So she scorns society's conventions and say, oh no, I'm not staying here any longer. I'm forging my own independence. I'm going out on my own. And in fact, she makes a deal with the devil. And I'll leave the rest up to your interest, but it's a fascinating novel with lots of kind of witchy affairs, but it's very empowering and it's very fascinating to read about the bits that make Lolly hers, about her character arc, and really some of that strength, some of that resilience is very much seen in Sylvia Townsend Warner, and I wasn't very familiar with the details of her biography before. Now I am. In Rural Hours, we really see the kind of resilience that Warner herself had, not only in sticking to her values, which I really admire, the fact that she decided, no, I don't want to be a part of this elite bourgeois background, even though she was born into it, and then just decided, I'm going to live a certain life, because it takes a lot of bravery to just reject your entire childhood upbringing and live a different life. Like, even if we personally can't understand her choice or agree with her, it's still a choice that merits some admiration. And more than that, it's how much effort she put into her rural living, how she saw a cottage and everybody thought this is the worst cottage I have ever seen in my life. It's about to collapse on itself, and Sylvia Townsend Warder said, no, I am going to live in there and I'm going to make it my home. And she really saw beauty in it and she really made it hers. And I think it just really shows her temperament and her spirit and, well, even her romance, because she eventually found love in that cottage. And I also like that Barker really presents us with these details, and instead of saying just something like, oh, she saw this house and she bought it, instead, she says, it was a plain building with a dirty stucco exterior, but she liked its neat proportions, slate roof, and narrow porch. Looking towards the back, she could see a thicket of overgrown garden. She had heard from friends in the village that the cottage was for sale, and now on an impulse she decided to go in. Crossing the road briskly, she went into the pub opposite to borrow the keys. After the bright April sunlight, the cottage was stuffy and dark. Sylvia looked over the rooms, the sitting room and compact kitchen, which was tucked beneath the sloping roof, the two upstairs bedrooms, one large, one small, with an adjoining door. Its unloveliness pleased her. There was no electricity or running water, but after the death of its previous owner, an elderly Miss Green, it was available freehold. It is very nice inside, she wrote in her diary later that day. Sizable rooms, a good back kitchen and stairs. No water, but a water butt. The garden is charming. Snow on the mountains, clove carnations, lavender, apple, and cherry trees. Like, is this not the most literary piece of biography work that you have ever heard before? And I love it because for a reader who prefers fiction over nonfiction, which I don't hide at all on this channel, it's a pleasant surprise to read biographies like these. Biographies that make you see, actually, I like nonfiction. I just don't like boring nonfiction. Yeah, it's riveting because Barker really allows us to see things through the eyes of these women, and it's immersive. And of course, I'm sure that some of you will say, but maybe this is not a good trait for a biographer. They should be like a historian. They should be objective. They should not be, like, they should be distanced a bit from the subject. Maybe, but I think that even if a consequence of this is idealization, and occasionally Barker has a tendency to look at things through rose-colored glasses, and some of her suppositions about the kind of justifications that the women had for their actions seem to be a bit far-fetched, a bit too maybe idealized, a bit too high-minded of their nobleness, when I think that they were very human women. At the same time, it just really goes to show the human aspects of these absolute legends in the literary world. And I think it makes us feel more interested in their story, and it makes us retain the information better. Occasionally, the book delves too much into the lyrical and overly optimistic, but largely it manages to toe that fine line between having a historical work on lesser known facts rather than a personal take. And really, it's about finding joy in the small things, like decorating your home, or cooking a pheasant to celebrate a birthday, or devising new recipes from the herbs, reclaiming drudge work. I made a note of this. It's romanticizing life, which, just on a personal note, I think this came into my life at the perfect time, as books have the tendency to do, because I am doing my very best recently to try and find joy in the small things, to find joy in the small things and to really feel happiness, even if it's not really something that other people would find significant. And it's a trend that has continued ever since I analyzed The Orange by Wendy Cope recently on my Instagram, so you can check out that poem. So I really like that because it fits in with this theme of things that I've been trying to do to have a more positive mindset on things. And I think it's books like Rural Hours that really make you feel invested in life, in the demands of daily things. Like, for example, while reading this book, at some point I had to take a break for lunch and I started cooking tomato soup. And I looked at the tomatoes and all I thought was, wow, I found these vegetables. Well, I didn't find them. I purchased them from Tesco. But like what Virginia Woolf would have seen as like finding vegetables, as she made little jots in her diary of, oh, look, the flowers have bloomed, or oh, like I acquired this or that. As she made notes of those small household things. And then I started cooking the vegetables and I thought, wow, how cool these facilities are. And I suddenly felt like I was Sylvia Townsend Warner picking out decorations for her house. And then I remembered Lehmann, Rosamond, simply enjoying the aromas of the kitchen and found myself transported to these imaginary fields where these tomatoes grew. And then I realized that I was just like, I just kept thinking about the book and I could just continue reading the book instead of zoning out over my tomato soup. And I realize I haven't actually spoken much of Rosamond Lehmann yet, and that's possibly because of the three women I was least interested in her. I admit, never heard of her. Okay, no, I did hear of her, but I've never properly read her work. I've never properly encountered her work, and honestly, reading her biography, there's not much similarity that I could find in our personalities. But relatability factor aside, I still really enjoyed her chapters, and time flies by when you're having fun, as they say. So her chapters were no less boring than any of the other women. Lehmann was the only woman who did have children out of here, as a little side note. And they were mostly away in boarding, so it's not like she was actively looking after her children. But I was just struck again by how different society was back then. How, for these women, it felt like they were so strange, and people thought them strange, that they were so alienated, that they were so untraditional because they were like lonely and alone. But I realized that there's a difference because they were alone, but I don't think that they were lonely at all. And in fact, it's a big contrast to the 21st century where solitary existence is sought after and admired, and it's a very different existence here. And I think this is also very much a book for the introverts. If anything, it speaks more and more to the truth in Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, because writers do need their space to write. And the countryside indeed provided that space. And of course, one could argue that the countryside is not the most influential thing. They would be absolutely justified in this argument. You cannot confidently claim that Virginia Woolf only wrote to the lighthouse because she spent time digging vegetables in Sussex. No, and Barker never does that. And I would criticize, and I would slightly detract from this biography, because there's not much of a perspective on the women's other lives, on their city lives, on the way that other factors maybe influenced their writing. But I think it's maybe because the focus of this book was from the onset different. It was supposed to focus on the lesser known parts of their lives, the often overlooked domesticity of rural hours, of living in the countryside. Because people often gloss over this period, especially for Virginia Woolf, since it's only like a few jots in her diary, and like I said, it's mostly like, oh, I got this. I stockpiled this, I found this. It's not really anything that gives us much insight into her mental being, and here Harriet Baker reimagines that, and she says, actually, no, it does give us insight. And I think it's just a very new approach. And I personally don't mind it, but I do think that if you're looking for something that is more complete, a more general overview, perhaps this is too specific for you. But in many ways, it does toe the fine balance between being a book for the general public because it's accessible, and also being a book for the reader that's slightly more familiar with the woman, like me and Virginia Woolf, because there was a lot here that I didn't know about her life. And I just want to say that a biography of three people is an incredibly challenging and daunting task, and I like the bravery and the confidence with which Barker approaches this task because it really shines through. Controversial opinion maybe, but out of all the biographies I've read, my personal favorite is when the biographers, or in some cases the autobiographers, are confident. I like it because it provides you with a certain certainty. Life throws so much uncertainty at you that it's nice when somebody takes the lead and say, yeah, I think their life goes in a certain way. So it's a daunting task to do that for three women. And I think the difficulty is that their lives just weren't really that connected. Like, they didn't really interact much with each other beyond a few letters, a few meetings. And what I like about it is that it's not their physical in-person meetings that is the overarching theme of connection in this book. It's actually the countryside hours. So it's interesting to see the overarching theme, the link being the countryside. And in the first part of the book, this is done particularly well because anyway, let's just pretend I don't have 20 million annotations, but the little tabs in blue are where I flagged the new sections. So the first was Virginia Woolf, then Sylvia, Townsend, then Rosamond, Lehmann, and then that was kind of the last section. And I would say that the latter half of the book was for me slightly disappointing because the author tried a different approach. So instead of sticking to 3 independent sections and then finding connections between the two, she attempted to link them together a bit more to provide like a general kind of summary of everything that's happening. Personal opinion, my personal hot take, not a fan. So I think the second half of this book was unfortunately far weaker, which made me detract from my overall rating. Nevertheless, I still enjoyed it immensely. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. And I have to say that Penguin Books actually emailed me and they told me, hey, like, we have this new biography coming out. We think you might be interested. I literally screamed for joy because honestly, like, even if they didn't reach out, I would have still probably went out and bought this book the moment that I saw it in a bookshop because I am very interested in it and I've been trying to travel more around the UK recently. So, as you might tell by my Instagram. So, to see Rural Hours about the English countryside was also hitting a personal note. But I do have to say, so that you guys know, I would never review a book positively if I didn't like it. I genuinely really enjoyed this book. Which is why I felt that I wanted to make an entire long rant chat video about it. So yeah, I just popped onto here for a very quick mid-April, okay fine, late April review. In all honesty, I am actually very, very late because the book came out on April 4th. It's April 21st when this video comes out, so slightly overdue, but that's because, as I said at the very beginning of the video, I think it's just a book for slow contemplation, let's say, for slow pleasure, for slow reading. Thank you so much for making it this far with my slightly messy review, admittedly. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.